Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Today is flower letter day. I do apologize that this letter is running a little bit behind. I had a couple of projects that I was working on and I kind of got just a little bit behind. I do apologize. This is the end of last month's letter and like I said, I'm just running a little bit behind with it. I do apologize for that, but this is letter number 4. So let's open it up and let's see what's on the inside. Okay. At least this one wasn't damaged like my last letter. Let's see. I think that's everything. Okay, so we have a business card. It says W.W. Hall. It says watches, clocks, jewelry, and silverware. Fine watch repairing and specialty. Good guaranteed as represented. Call and see me. No trouble to show goods. And this is what the front of it looks like. And that is super cute. I do really, really love that color. That's very, very cute. Looks like... here's the letter. I do know that. Ooh, it feels kind of heavy. And then, well, okay, so there's a postcard. Oh, and I love this postcard. It's really like dark kind of blue on the back, and I absolutely love the color. We have some pink and red, we have some purple. I love that. I just love how the color just stands out like that. And then the back of it. And this, I don't know, it looks kind of long. Usually this is like the extra. It's saying Death Notice, Society News, the Frisco Town Crier. Must be like one of their news, like a newspaper clipping, I guess is what this is. So we'll get back to this, because usually that's like an extra after you read the letter. So we'll just set it aside for now. And like I said, this letter feels pretty thick, guys. And I know these letters have been really, really long. So I've been just trying to kind of get into the letter and read it for you guys. So it looks like we've got 1, 2, looks like we got 4 pages. So let's just kind of jump into this and see who it's from. It says, "My darling Katie, April 27th, 1884. I don't know how to write you this letter, but I know I must, for the consequences of it concern us both. I've only been in Frisco for 1 day, but knew I needed to write to you right away. Yet even now, I'm uncertain as to whether I'll be able to afford to post this. You see, contrary to what I had planned upon my arrival in this waterless, heathenistic wilderness, I'm not a married woman, nor do I have any notion of becoming so. I will start at the beginning, dearest, as none of this will make a stitch of sense to you otherwise. After what happened in Chicago, I never dreamed I'd find further adventure on my journey west, but it seems trouble has followed me all the way to Frisco, and in the worst way. We changed trains in Salt Lake City and boarded the Utah Central Railway before heading westward toward Frisco. We've been traveling for half the day and we're just leaving a town called Leamington when Mr. Hickman and I made our way to the dining car for lunch. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very pleasant lunch, as I finally found the opportunity to tell him I was on my way to Frisco to be married. He congratulated me, but then excused himself and left the car in such an abrupt manner. I was left wondering how on earth I could have offended him. So much has happened since meeting him, Katie. Mr. Matthew Hickman is the most excellent of gentlemen, and the last person I wish to harm in any way. I had just made up my mind to go after him and make amends if I could, when the train suddenly lurched and the wheels began to squill, making the most ghastly racket. The next moment, several gunshots were heard. The dining car broke into utter madness. When I finally managed to enter the next car, rather than finding Mr. Hickman, as I hoped, I found myself staring down the barrel of a pistol. A masked bandit shouted for me to get to the floor. I refused, of course. I was wearing my magenta velvet and taffy-ette. I wasn't about to destroy dozens of hours of some of the finest pleating and embroidery work I've ever done just because a meter like himself wanted what was in my handbag. I told him as much, as I tend to do, of course, if I'd been carrying more than Mr. Gamut's dreadful ring, dearest. I might not have been so brazen, but I ask you, what better way to avoid our first fight as husband and wife than to have his hideous ring stolen? That's when I realized the bandit was just standing there, staring at me. I watched his eyes change from fleety still to utter bewilderment. Then he lowered his gun. At the time, I imagined it was because he never had a lady stand up to him before. How wrong I was, Katie. The bandit's hesitation gave me a moment to examine him more closely, and I noticed a strange moon-shaped scar on the top of his right wrist. It was outlined by several small dots where stitching had obviously and very clumsily been employed to sew up the wound. Before I noticed any more, Mr. Hickman burst into the car from the opposite end, a pistol in his hand, yelling for the bandit and his 4 other comrades to drop their weapons. The moment the bandit saw Mr. Hickman's Pinkerton badge winking at them from his other hand, they blew past me, scrambling over each other to try and get off the train. To tell the truth, I was just as shocked as they were. Not once in all of our conversations since leaving Chicago had Mr. Hickman even hinted at being a Pinkerton agent. Mr. Hickman approached me then, asking if I was all right. When I assured him I was, we returned to our seats and spent the rest of the trip to Frisco in awkward silence. A Pinkerton agent. Katie, what would he think of me if he knew about Da? What would Da think if he were alive? My confession, compounded by Mr. Hickman's revelation, had all but restored the easy, friendly manner that existed between us since Chicago. I don't mind admitting to you that it significantly dampened my spirits. I've since discovered I quite enjoy the company of Mr. Hickman and his lovely Texan breed manners more than any other man of my acquaintance. When we finally reached Frisco, my spirits were even more dampened when I saw how much Sylvester had exaggerated the town's attractions. It's nothing but dust, wind, and wide open space out here. Katie, they do have glorious sunset, and it's a spring, so there's a little bit of beauty. I'll give them that, but there's hardly a tree in sight, and the wind is always blowing. There isn't any water for drinking or boiling either. The water that's here must be freighted in from the neighboring town of Milford, which is 15 miles to the east. You must purchase water by the bucket, which leads me to the next deplorable thing about this place. Because of the lack of water, everyone quenches their thirst at the saloons, of which there are 22. If there wasn't enough, there is every sort of gambling hall, brothel, and opium den a person in pursuit of could wish for. The entire town is rampant with the vilest of deadly sins on full display to offend every living creature endlessly walking down the boardwalk. It's a veritable pit of lawless barbarism. And what do you think greeted me almost the moment my boots hit the dusty street? A lynching, front and center on the main street for all to see, as though it were the main event of a traveling show. There's no sheriff or deputy in sight. There isn't any law in Frisco. I learned this firsthand, and yet I still haven't told you the worst part of my story. After retrieving my trunk for me, and before parting, Mr. Hickman said he'd feel a lot better if he saw me safely to my attendant's residence, particularly with the lynching happening right there on Main Street. I wasn't about to refuse him. We found our way in silence, and when we reached Sylvester's residence, a grand wooden house built along one of the foothills here, at least he didn't exaggerate that, Mr. Hickman and I said our goodbyes. I don't mind telling you how reluctant I was to see him go. He is the most interesting person I've ever met, Katie. He's all the manly ruggedness one would expect from a man in his profession. Yet he's also kind and funny, gentle. He has all the qualities I feel a man should have. You know, I've always believed love in marriage was simply a matter of luck, and that one could build a perfectly adequate life with someone merely respected. After all, that's what Da and Mama did. However, as I watched Mr. Hickman striding back down Main Street in his sure-footed way, I was almost certain my life would never feel adequate again if he wasn't in it. But I'm nothing if a woman of my word, so I stuffed those growing feelings back down into the deep concern of my heart, then forced myself to knock on Sylvester's door. He wasn't at home. His housekeeper told me he'd been away at the mine all day. She showed me to the room prepared for me. It was immaculate, all done up in nice wine velvets, brocade satins, everything dripped with gold fringe. Between you and me, it was as gaudy as Sylvester's wedding ring. I busied myself changing into my wedding clothes and attending to my toilet for an hour or so. I even allowed the maid Sylvester hired for me to help me into my new corset and gown. Most wouldn't bother with such extravagance for an unconventional wedding like mine, but if I was going to be the only dressmaker in Frisco, I wanted my skill with the dress to be on full display from the start. After all, there's no harm in turning the rumor mill straight away. When I finished dressing my hair, I looked at my reflection, and Katie, how I wish you could have seen me. You know, I'm not vain about my looks. We both know you got the beauty our parents had to offer, which is why I don't mind telling you that the sight of me in my wedding finery was grand indeed. I was just wishing Mr. Hickman had been able to see me like this when I heard a man's voice below stairs. I scolded myself for having such unruly thoughts again and readied myself to meet my groom. The housekeeper was sent up to fetch me. I followed her down the stairs with each step toward the parlor. I imagined what Sylvester might look like all the while. I'm ashamed to say, hoping he had Mr. Hickman's lovely blue eyes and dimples. When I finally met Mr. Gambit, I was disappointed by his appearance. He's handsome, medium height, with shady blonde hair and brown eyes. He looks younger than I imagined, and his smile is pleasant. He appeared to be even more nervous than I was, for his eyes dashed all around, looking everywhere but at me. I, on the other hand, only felt as though I'd swallowed a fresh bowl of Mr. Frisbee's garden worms. The preacher was in the parlor as well, so Sylvester offered me his arm, and that, my darling Katie, is precisely when all the plans came crashing down around me. As we entered the parlor, Mr. Gambit reached up to adjust his collar. I glanced over at him, trying to smile and set his obvious nerves at ease. That's when I saw it, there on his wrist, in the exact same place on the bandits from the train, was that moon-shaped scar. I looked again just to be certain, and sure enough, it was surrounded by those sloppy stitch scars. Well, Katie, you'll be proud of me. I didn't throw a single thing at him. That is, not until he insisted that if I wasn't going to marry him, I would have to pay back every cent he paid to get me out here. Only then did I throw that hideous ring at him. I'm proud to say it hit him in the cheekbone and bounced off and shattered a mirror hanging over the mantel behind him. The crash was immensely satisfying, and I hope from the top of my head to the lips of my boot that it wasn't only a precious and extremely valuable family heirloom. Thank you very much. After that, I apologized to the preacher for startling him and excused myself. I asked the maid to pack my things and have them ready to deliver to an address I would provide as soon as I found different lodging, and then I left. When I got down the street a little way, I didn't know where to go. Had I not been in such a curliff, I would have noticed how dark it was getting, and I would have gotten myself to the nearest hotel as soon as possible. But dearest, all I could think of was you. How am I going to get you west now? That was the only thought swirling through my mind until I became increasingly aware that I had wandered into an especially unsavory part of town. You and I have both found ourselves in the more wretched spots of Mott Haven and New York's surrounding slums from time to time. We've both seen things we wish we hadn't, but darling, somehow the West is different. There is no law here. The man who draws the fastest is the law. Even now, I'm not certain which road I took that led me to the red light district of Frisco, but when I finally came to myself, I had just tripped over a body in the street. It wasn't dead, thank goodness, but completely sauced. In fact, there were inebriated men and scarlet women everywhere, and if they weren't drunk, they had just wandered out of the various opium dens and brothels lined that street. When some of the women saw me, the poor souls mentioned my ivory silk and started pawing at me with their grimy hands. Had I not been so disoriented, I would have politely excused myself and ran for it. But I won't trouble you with the basic carnality of it all. Let us just say it was incumbent upon me to remove myself from the vile environment as soon as possible, and unfortunately I didn't do it with dignity or grace. When I was finally free of them and I turned a corner onto a more respectable street, 3 women stepped out of a nearby saloon. They didn't look like the sort I'd just come from, so I asked them for help. Thankfully, they took pity on me and led me inside. Now, Katie, in the 5 years I spent fitting and sewing dresses for New York debutante, I've seen some rare beauties. I assure you, however, not one of them holds a candle to these 3 women who came to my rescue. Once I saw them in the lightest saloon, they were dazzling, the most beautiful dark-haired beauties I've ever seen in all my life. They made sure I was all right, and then one of them asked if they could see me home. That's when I found myself blinking back tears and telling them my entire predicament concerning Mr. Gambit. "You came all the way to Frisco to marry Sylvester?" the oldest of the 3 asked. When I nodded, they swore and called him a yellow-belly swine. It seems I was completely deceived by him and his letters. He is a very wealthy man, one of the Horn Silver Mines owners. But why rob trains then? For the thrill of it, I don't understand. After hearing my plight, the ladies were about to take me over to Milford with them as soon as I can tell my dilemma to the sheriff there. But then I remembered Mr. Hickman. He had never said he was leaving Frisco right away, and I knew I could trust him. So I asked if they might help me find him. I told them he was a Pinkerton. After exchanging a knowing smile, the 3 women assured me they knew him as well, and a finer specimen of a man they ever beheld. I was no longer betrothed to Mr. Gambit, so I felt no guilt at all in agreeing with them very heartily. That's when they told me they just knew where to find him. What seemed like only moments later, the women had brought me to a respectable-looking hotel. They then wished me luck, mounted their horses, and rode off. I didn't even have a chance to thank him. When I finally entered the hotel, it didn't take me long to spot Mr. Hickman through the crowded dining parlor. The room fell silent once everyone saw me standing there in my wedding clothes, but I didn't care because the moment Mr. Hickman saw me, he stood and started to warn me. And Katie, there was a look in his eyes I've never seen before. I'm not sure what it means entirely, but I must tell you that when I saw it, I felt overwhelmingly relieved that Mr. Gambit turned out to be a train robber. So now you have it all, Katie. The whole strange and particular tale of my Western adventure. It hasn't turned out the way we intended it all, but I'm not giving up hope. There's got to be another way to get you out of New York before the winter. I'll write again as soon as I have a new plan. Your most faithful and loving sister, Lily Clara. And then down here at the bottom, it says, to discover more about train travel and train robbery in the Wild West, visit the Learn page at flowerletter.com. And once again, we have a beautiful picture here. I love that. So okay guys, I really love this letter. I can't believe the 3 women that she met is the Bright sisters. Like, I'm absolutely for sure that that is who she met. And of course, well, they know Mr. Hickman. So they were there. That's what he came there for, was looking for them. But it was really good of them to actually help her. And I want to just say, what a douche. Mr. Gambit turned out to be. And who would have thought he would have been the train robber? But I am going to say I'm actually glad that it worked out that way, because I was actually rooting for Mr. Hickman. I thought maybe she might just stay on that train with him and continue on. Okay, so let's see what this is. This looks like a newspaper clipping, or maybe like one of their just short newspapers. The Frisco Town Crier. It says, "A fortunate Frisco welcome," by Mortimus Snerd. It says, "Yesterday at 4:37 p.m., the afternoon train rolled into Frisco just in time to witness a good old-fashioned lynching. The victim was Oliver Snape, previously the head foreman at the Hornsilver Mine, ever known in the mining community as a stalwart." Cries of outrage ran through Frisco last week when one of the mine owners, our Mr. Sylvester Gambit, produced evidence that Snape had been playing a very deep game of cooking the books. Despite Snape's unwavering resistance to the contrary and some rather incoherent babbling about faulty shoring and whatnot, he was found guilty by a jury of Frisco's finest citizens, and Milford's sheriff was immediately sent for. It just says that the sheriff arrived, the crowd was rowdy, they broke out into a mob, breaking Snape from the safety of the town jail this afternoon, proceeding to serve him justice from the back of a horse with the help of a rope. The deed took place under the lone sycamore at the end of the street. Due to Mr. Gambit's timely telegram, Mr. Snape was promptly notified of her husband's unfortunate demise. The good people of Frisco send their deepest condolences and regrets. So, okay. I think there's going to be some shady stuff going on here in Frisco. Let's see. This says, "In medicine for the purifying of the blood." This is just, it looks like an old, like remedy or something that they're advertising. This looks like some kind of hair treatment. This looks like an advertisement for lung trouble. Maybe glasses, waterproof garments. Let's see. Really, it just looks like business advertisements. This one, it's got like a sewing machine, paints, roofing, steam pipes, stockings. This is an Egyptian Oriental eye ointment, inflamed eyes, lids, stays. So basically, it's just business advertisements, basically. This just says, the death notices, so I guess who had perhaps passed away, and of course this guy, Oliver Snape in there. It looks like magic ink. This ink has the appearance of pure water. The writing can be made visible by those only possessing the secret to do so. A bottle with secret, sent by mail on receipt of $1. Society news. Among those welcome to our town yesterday was one Miss Lily Clara Moore, our own Sylvester Gambit's bride-to-be. If the rumors be true, however, it appears she is Gambit's bride never to be. Pinkerton agent Matthew Hickman was also among the newcomers hot on the trail of the infamous outlaw sisters, the Bright Stars. Unfortunately, they gave him a slip last night without much trouble. Since begs the question, how good of a Pinkerton are you, Mr. Hickman? For those gentlemen yet to behold the latest expedition of Miss Lottie's ladies at Le Petit Chateau Froissels, tomorrow is the final performance of her latest variety show. Miss Lottie was simply outdone herself this time with a Shakespearean theme to drool over. If you love Shakespearean spoofs, pretty acrobats, not to mention the occasional flash of ankle, you won't want to miss this one. Reports that Hector Lynx has taken to the bottle again have reached the Frisco Town Crier after leaving the Silver Lion last night. Lynx took the streets claiming to have seen a specter gliding along the peak of Boot Hill. the good people of Frisco kindly ask Elijah Hearn to refrain for serving Link's whiskey after 10, at least until the flavor of his madness passes. Lest we forget, the editor will kindly remind the readers of the celestial orb sightings. Okay, so basically it was a bunch of advertisements. It's letting you know about the lynching, and it was also letting you know that, of course, they did see her and Mr. Hickman there, and it was confirmed that it was the Bright sisters that she actually met, which is really cool. So I like that. I think it could have, you know, maybe skipped some of the advertisements in it and stuff, but the letter was super cute. I do like it so far. I love all the things that we've got in it so far. I like the adventure that she's got, and I actually really am excited to see her and Mr. Hickman maybe kind of, you know, maybe move along in their relationship, you know, whether or not they get together, you know, that will also be good as well. And I'm not really sure if I kind of really want to root for the Bright sisters or not. I mean, they do kind of seem like they are good. They're not really all that bad, perhaps, but we'll just kind of see as we go. You guys let me know what you think about the letter so far. I do apologize again for being late. I did lose track of time just working on other projects. It kind of pushed me back a little bit, but I am very excited to get through this letter, and I do believe that I got letter 5 in the mail today, so I will try to get that one up and posted as well. You guys let me know if you like this letter more than you did the last one. I do think this one does have more adventure than the last one. And like I said, I love the Wild West, love the adventure. I kind of hope maybe they're going to get out there more in the Wild West and not just kind of stay in Frisco. Like maybe they'll kind of move on a little bit, but we'll kind of see about that. So I will see you guys back here in my next flower letter. Bye, guys.